Testing for YouTube. Testing one, two, three.
It's 6 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Thank you. Everybody's having a nice chat, but we have a lot on the agenda, so we need to get going. Before I start with the formal part of our meeting, I'd like to read an announcement. The City of Port Alberni has been made aware of a GoFundMe fundraiser using the city's logo illegally. The city has absolutely no involvement in this GoFundMe campaign. We've requested the organizer remove the city's logo from this site. If you do have any questions, you can please contact the city administration staff tomorrow. Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize that we work, live, and play in the city of Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded territories of the Shuswap and Hupacheset First Nations. Is there any late items identified by committee members? Councillor Solda.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to add the Port Pub, please, on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll put that under unfinished business. Any late items identified by the corporate officer?
No late items, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Could we get a motion that the agenda be approved as amended? Moved by Councillor Solda, second by Councillor Name. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And just notice a video recording and live streaming, and this meeting will be recorded and broadcast on YouTube. We have minutes from the meeting held at 6 p.m. on March 18, 2024. Is any errors or omissions?
Move to adopt.
Thank you. Could I get a seconder? Moved by Councillor Solda, second by Councillor Dame. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is public input period. This is an opportunity for the public to address the committee. A maximum of 6 speakers for no more than 5 minutes each will be accommodated. For those participating electronically, please use the raise your hand feature and you will be called upon to speak in the order of which it appears. Would anybody like to come and speak? The gentleman in the front row, please. I'm a first. You're first. And if you could just turn on the speaker.
Yes, I'll do that. I'll open my notes here for a second.
While he's getting ready, I'll just mention that Mayor Minions could not be here tonight, but she is participating in the meeting online. Could we just ask you to push on the speaker so people at home can hear you?
Okay, before I start, I'd like to pass my air stick on to the counselors and have them examine it. And if you can please pass this back to me when I have 2 minutes left. My name's Gary Sinan, and I was born in Holland. I started work at SOMAS Division in 1962. And by 1980, I owned my own house, free and clear. My 41-year-old father came to Canada, came to Souk with $10 in his pocket, and moved to Port Alberni in a year. And in 23 years, he happened to acquire 3 houses and became self-supporting in his lifetime. We don't need to saddle the coming generation with a mountain of debt if we have a self-supporting society. And I'm apologizing to the people that are younger than myself for not being able to keep the liberty that I had when I was growing up. Port Alberni was a very affluent place at that particular time. And City Council knows that Port Alberni is not what it was. So one of the reasons it's not what it is because we have energy restrictions that are draconian. And part of that is our provincial governments and the federal government. You are councillors that are still 1 foot in the private sector. And so I'm hoping that you'll have more consideration for the plight of the ordinary citizen than the people in Ottawa have. In Ottawa, they're destroying things. They're destroying energy infrastructure, and they're having fun doing so. They've lost my problem. They've done this with our fortune. They've taken $100 bills out of your pocket, burnt up energy systems that are viable, and they want to turn us into net zero by 2050. 85% of the transportation of fuel that we use comes from hydrocarbons. Air, shipping, trucking, trains, cars, all run on fossil fuel. 50% of the electricity still comes back to us from coal. So if the air stick is available, behind me? Yeah. This is a meter long, so every centimeter is a percentage point. This represents oxygen. This represents nitrogen. Nitrogen is 78%, oxygen 21%. Can you guess where the carbon dioxide is? And it's not the white piece. The white piece happens to be argon. The carbon dioxide that we're arguing about is this piece of material. 400 parts in a million, 40 parts in 10,000, 1 penny in $250 that you've got in your wallet. I painted it orange on one side because that's the draconian part. That's the part we produce. The rest is natural, and trees would die without it. There would not be a green plant living. And so what I'm really here to do is to ask you, when you're at the BC municipality meetings and what have you, that you argue for the case of keeping some fossil fuel around and not give it up, and tell the politicians above you that you're not in favor of having a net zero by 2050. And I've got a pamphlet that I want to hand out to you that's got what you get out of oil. And on the back of it, I've got contact information, and I've got a couple of websites that will tell you that the issue is not as draconian as they suggest. So if anybody's interested in it, I've got a handout for them. I rest my case.
Thank you very much. And you did under 5 minutes.
Well, I work at it. Does anybody want a handout?
Yeah, if you just give it to our CEO, he'll hand it out.
Okay. There's four copies, or 5 copies?
Yeah, and I'll make copies for
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I think the lady in blue is next, had her hand up. If you want to come on up and state your name.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of City Council, my name is Michelle Fraser. It has come to public attention that drag queen Miss Frida has been invited into Echo Center at 1 p.m. on May 26, 2024 to entertain 7 to 12-year-olds with drag queen story time. On a Facebook post, Miss Frida is seen in a provocative pose, flipping the bird at the camera with a headline, "Sex with Me," and written on the wall behind is FUBITCH. And I show the picture here. Last November, Council banned Action for Canada from renting city facilities because of a Facebook post by founder Ms. Tanya Gaw. Mayor Minion said, if someone came into Council chambers and said what Ms. Gaw said, posted, I would ask them to leave. I would not allow that kind of speech in Council chambers, and I don't believe we should support that kind of speech in a city facility. Recognizing that that was not the intent of the event and that this person may have multiple topics of interest, that comment was so incredibly offensive to me, it crossed a very significant line, and that specific comment spoken in council chambers or a city facility would not be supported to enter a city facility. With that same line of reasoning, if we were to substitute Ms. Frida's messaging, sex with me and FU and all that, and her long fingernail, flipping the bird, would Ms. Frida still be welcome in a city facility? As Ms. Frida is providing a service to the city, says Director Dr. Willa Thorpe, that is not reflective of the subject matter of her social media posts, the city will continue to welcome Ms. Frida's participation at this and future Parks and Rec and Culture programs. Recognizing that Ms. Frida may have multiple moves and desire to act like a lady perhaps, her messaging in this photo crosses a very significant red line that is deemed decent. In fact, it is outright indecent. It is incredulous to me and to anyone looking at this post that Ms. Frida seemed displaying such offensive, disrespectful attitude while advertising sex with me will continue to be asked to entertain children in Port Alberni. Knowing what we now know about how sexual predators groom children by gaining access to them and building relationships with them, how can Port Alberni residents be sure that vulnerable children are safe in city facilities? Has Ms. Frida passed a criminal record check? I am hereby feeling that I'm forced to serve Ms. Phillithorpe, City Council, with notices of liability, lest any child come to psychological, emotional, or physical harm at a drag queen city-sponsored event in Port Alberni. Sincerely, Michelle Fraser.
Thank you. Did anyone, Mr. Fraser, come on up. Nice to see you, Randy.
Thank you. Randy Fraser, no relation. So putting together the city's budget is undoubtedly one of the hardest jobs and parts of councils. Trying to balance all the services, the needs of the city, keeping up with ongoing maintenance, as well as providing the necessary improvements within a budget that won't be a hardship to the citizens. The second hardest part of your job is convincing the public, the average homeowner, the need for that increase, the importance of the necessary work, and what you are undertaking is not a waste of taxpayers' money. Over the years, the city's tried a few different models to inform and engage the public. As you know, the amount of tax increase usually dictates the public response. So when we are seeking a tax increase, especially a large one, information is key. Not just a line item. Not many people look at the budget document or let alone can follow it. It's important and necessary to ensure you're giving us as much information, details, and as easy as possible for the public to understand. For many years, generally the city budget process began with the city manager who would give a presentation and overview of the budget, its increase, impact, comparisons, costs, all sorts of things. And it also was at a dedicated budget meeting, and out of that would flow the schedule for department managers for their meetings, which they would present the projects, the improvements, the upcoming work they needed, and the cost to it. And it was also strictly for that budget year. Sometimes in the evening, sometimes they were in the day, sometimes they were well attended, sometimes they weren't. And that's when council then got to work. But about 7 years ago, the city moved away from that format into more of just a single presentation. First it started with the CAO, now it's the Director of Finance. And there seems to be less information as the years have passed. I'm not sure if that's a deliberate or it's just because of the continuing rotation of managers. Oh no. But nonetheless, I believe that this year provided the least information opportunity for the involvement of the public. It was almost a year ago that council made changes to the public input at regular council meetings by moving them to the committee of the whole meetings. Why? As one councillor said, it was to put public engagement in its most effective place. Another said, this is a less formal process and might make people more comfortable to come forward and speak. And another councillor said, we're trying to achieve here is a more free discussion in committee of the wholes. Unfortunately, committee of the whole meetings have not provided any of this. These meetings have been just as formal as regular council meetings with all the regular business taking place. In the beginning of the budget process, the city advertised its roadmap of the process that had the timeline and that included 2 committee of the whole meetings that were titled Let's Talk Budget public engagement sessions. The 2 public meetings had more business than a regular council meeting. The February 20th meeting was 3 hours, 20 minutes long. Council spent 46 minutes on the budget. The March 4th meeting was 4 hours. You spent 50 minutes on the budget. There was no free discussion with the public. Most of the meetings were new business. They had a number of delegations, presentations, and the like. And all the meeting was all the time, the meeting was supposed to be public engagement. The committee of the whole meetings are the only place for public input. And public input, as you know, is at the start of the meeting. And it really is the only chance someone has to come and talk on a subject of concern or a chance to maybe just rant a little bit like I'm doing. You may listen, you may not. You may be checking your emails, texts, who knows, and wondering how long this guy's gonna ramble on for. And when the people are finished, it's the mayor who has the gavel. So it's up to her whether she engages or just moves on to the next person. And there is really, at the committee of the whole meetings on the budget, there was no discussion of the person's concerns, ideas about the budget. They weren't entertained, even though some people had brought up some good ideas. So the only other opportunity for the public is question period at the end of the meeting. Now, with the length of those 2 meetings, it reminds me of the old saying, the mind can absorb no more than the seat can absorb. And I'm pretty sure by some of those meetings, both of those were pretty numb in most people. It takes a dedicated citizen to sit that long to come and ask a question. But the meetings were advertised, public engagement. That definition of public engagement is a way to bring citizens, community, nonprofit organizations, businesses, and government together to solve problems that affect people's lives. Even during the budget portion of the meetings, and all the Let's Talk Budget discussion is on that side of the podium, right? There was no public engagement at all. The discussions, the decisions had already been made, right? You're just telling us what you were gonna do. And I know staff
Sorry,
puts a lot
Randy,
of-
you're just about ready to wind up because you're past your 5 minutes.
I am just about ready.
Perfect.
I know staff puts a lot of effort into the Q&A and document, right? And it's opportunity for people to get into there. But some questions in there aren't answered. Some are generic, and they may provide a record of what the budget, but it would be nice if the budget meetings were sort of more solely budget, with managers making presentations, opportunities for the public to ask questions. The more information you give people, the better it is, right? For whatever format you choose to engage the public, I believe it is important to provide them with as much information as possible on the budget and projects. The transparency not only builds trust, but also ensures the public is well informed. The more information you provide, the less misinformation there will be.
Thank you, Randy. I'll just make one short comment. When I first became a counselor, I can't remember if it was the first year or the first 2 years, they did have department presentations, and I don't know why it stopped, but we did already make a motion to have it start again next year. And also, I agree 100% about the length of the meetings and the lack of public input for the budget. And that's one thing I was going to talk about for next year, was that if we have a committee of the whole meeting for a budget, it should be strictly for budget to give people the opportunity to have input. Because I'm going to be honest, I agree, after 4 hours, I was done. And a lot of the public that did want to have input had left by that time. So you're absolutely correct. Thank you. Did anybody else want to come up? Is there anybody online? Perfect, we'll move on. Next is delegations. We have Mosaic Forest Management. We have Vice President Molly Hudson and Land Use Forester Colin Kozman to provide an overview of operations. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you this evening. I believe I might have a presentation coming up. So as you mentioned, my name is Molly Hudson. I'm the Chief Forester and Vice President of Sustainability at Mosaic Forest Management. I'm joined tonight by my teammate, Colin Kozman, who's a land use forester on my team. I'm going to start out by just running through a quick intro or reminder about Mosaic, cover a few corporate initiatives, and then Colin's going to get down into the Alberni Valley details and some of the stuff we have going on locally. Hello. Great, thank you. Good? There we go, great. So just a reminder about who we are. Mosaic is Canada's largest private timberland producer. We operate mostly north of Souk, south of Campbell River on the east side of Vancouver Island. We also operate on a number of Crown licenses, a tree farm license and some forest licenses north of Campbell River and onto the mainland coast. Our business employs upwards of 2,000 people in our operations. That's harvesting, road building, tree planting, all of the professional services that we utilize. And our products go to 50 local mills across BC. If those local mills don't need our fiber, that wood can be sold to the overseas market as well. We just completed an economic supply chain study with COFI, the Council of Forest Industries. You maybe saw their news release last week. What we do is we submit all of our supply chain impact to COFI and they roll it up, but that also tells us what we do at a local level. So that study was done on 2022's year, and in the Port Alberni Valley, our business, Mosaic, is about $30 million a year into the local supply chain, and that's with dozens of local vendors, everything from the tire shop to the logging and tree planting companies that do the work for us in the woods. We do also have a lot of local employment. I'm going to cover that in a second. First off, I'll just go to the right where you can see some of our key certifications. Our Progressive Aboriginal Relations certification is granted to us by the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business. We're certified by the Forest Safety Council as a safe company, and our forest management is all under the forest management standard overseen by the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. So those are just a sample of some of the external frameworks that we subscribe to signal how we intend to do business. Back to local employment, and I'm not getting a forward on my slide, if someone could help me out. There we go. Thank you very much. This is just an example of some of the folks who do the important work for us on the ground here in the Alberni Valley. In terms of full-time equivalents, depending on the time of year, it can probably vary from 50 to 100 full-time equivalents. Obviously, right now we're deeply into our tree planting season, so you've seen folks like, you've probably seen Sitka and Zanzibar. Locally, we're planning to plant by the end of this month 6.2 million seedlings across our land base. So those local companies are important partners for us to get those trees in the ground locally. And then you can see a few of our other important contractors that do the work for us here in the Alberni Valley, including Ryder Contracting, Coastal Bridge, Big Lake, Mount Sicker isn't up here, Brad Berry and his business. Next up, and I'm still going to need help to keep going forward here, please and thanks. Just a reminder that, we under various names have been operating for over 100 years on BC's coast, and we take great pride in continually producing fiber logs from our forest to provide to downstream manufacturers, and then all the benefits that come from that as well. We're also proudly owned by two pension funds, the BC Government Employees Pension Fund and the Federal Government Employees Pension Fund. They're great partners for us in terms of investors because pension funds have very long time horizons in terms of when and how they want to provide returns to their clients, their pensionees, and we as forest managers are thinking in very long time horizons as well. So there's nice alignment there. And then as I noted before, according to the law and to policy, we are required to send our timber to local mills first, but we also really value our relationships with local customers and work hard to have a predictable and consistent supply of fiber to downstream manufacturers. Next slide, please. Thanks. A few of the things that happened for us in 2023 that we're proud of. We achieved PAR Gold level. We're the first forest company in Canada to achieve that level of recognition from the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. We were again noted as one of BC's top employers in 2023. And we hit the $750,000 mark in terms of our support to community organizations, big and small, big organizations like the Pacific Salmon Foundation, the Marmot Recovery Foundation, who have been partners with us for decades, all the way down to local food banks and school food programs. So that takes a lot of effort from our staff and making sure that those dollars get to the right place. And of course, you can always go on our website to apply to receive some of those funds yourself for your organization. And then we really put a lot of effort last year and every year into continuing to build up our First Nations scholarship and training programs. Next slide, please. Thanks. And one initiative that we're really proud of that we were here a couple of years ago to talk to you about is our Big Coast Forest Climate Initiative. This is 40,000 hectares of forest that have been removed from our harvest plans and are now generating carbon credits that are sold on the global voluntary carbon credit market to offset emissions for various companies who are engaged in a path to carbon neutrality. So the website is there. There's lots of information. There is some technical elements of these carbon credit programs, but what it means for the Alberni Valley, if you could hit the next slide for me, is that all of these areas in green have been designated as no harvest zones. And so you can see we have some important local areas there adjacent to Cathedral Grove along McLaughlin Ridge in the drinking watershed, where we took primarily forests that have never been harvested before, committed to not harvesting them into the future so that we could generate those carbon credits. So really, a win-win for community, wildlife habitat, drinking water provision, and also a way for our organization to generate return on that in the global voluntary carbon market. Next slide, please. I think at this stage, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Colin.
Great. Thanks, Molly. So just wanted to talk about wildfire for a minute. More than 70% of wildfires on our lands are human caused. Unfortunately, an example is the Cameron Bluffs fire from last year. But Mosaic certainly supported the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and local communities with the challenges that created from an illegal fire in the area. So we're currently focusing right now a lot of resources for the wildfire season to protect our land base and also adjacent communities. So lots of work there. Just wanted to share that we do have a wildfire fact sheet on our website. There's an image of it there, but if anybody's interested, it's certainly available publicly. And just in terms of transportation, Mosaic continues to participate in the Transportation Advisory Committee and working with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on various levels and various fronts. Next slide, please. So hole in the wall, very dangerous parking scenario there. The photo on the upper left shows 4 mountain bikers, 4 youth crossing the highway 2 years ago during an evening. Roughly around that time, MLA Osborne's office organized a committee meeting with the ACRD, the Alberni Valley Tourist Information Group, and also Mosaic participated in that. And I've been involved with discussions with the ACRD and others since that point in time. We've certainly done a few field tours with mayor and council from the city of Port Alberni and discussed hole in the wall at various levels. In August of last year, the ACRD showed interest in doing a feasibility study. And in March of this year, Mosaic received a letter from the ACRD saying that they're no longer interested in prioritizing this for public access. So Mosaic continues to be open to participating in any local government initiatives in public interest here, and certainly supporting access to hole in the wall. Just wanted to share, we did have recent harvesting and road construction in this area. And, during the planning process, realized there's some sensitivity around tourism. So we reached out to staff from the city of Port Alberni, the ACRD, Chamber of Commerce, and also other local groups. So certainly transparent in our plans and our activities in this area. More recently, Mosaic has supported ADSS in tree planting in this area and also issuing firewood permits. So they've raised thousands of dollars for their school program, and Mosaic's certainly proud to support their interests and support their program. Next slide, please. So in terms of watersheds, we do a lot of work around protecting water quality. We meet with annual water purveyors at least annually, at least each year, to provide updates on our activities. So lots of conversations and information sharing there. We also do field tours and discussions with the City of Port Alberni, Mayor and Council. Since I've been with Mosaic for the last few years, I believe we've done 2 of those. And we would certainly welcome another tour this spring if there's interest from the group. So extend that offer. And, just lots of communications through the year in terms of our activities. So just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. In terms of community drinking waters, we do have a fact sheet that's available publicly on our website. It has a lot of information about all the efforts we make in terms of protecting drinking water, information about all the legislation that applies, along with our environmental certification, and all the outreach and communications that we do with local purveyors and other groups. So just wanted to share that with everyone. Next slide, please. So in terms of tourism and public access to our private managed forest lands, our campgrounds are certainly an asset in terms of drawing people to the Alberni Valley. Our newest campground, which is at Loon Lake, has been successful, 27-site campground with a new dock. And the photo on the upper right is from last summer. Mosaic participated in a Hupicheseth ceremony and pole raising at the Hupicheseth cultural kiosk. So between 150 and 200 folks showed up. The Hupicheseth First Nation, of course, was there along with the Tashot and several New Chalmeth First Nations, but really proud to support a cultural kiosk and the celebration that happened there. We also have the McTush campground, close to 100 sites on the Alberni Inlet, and that's a huge draw for campers along the inlet and fishermen. But in terms of the access agreements, we provide an access agreement to the Alberni Motocross Association, draws a lot of people to the community for motocross events. We also provide one for the Sprout Lake Water Sports Association. We have an access agreement with the Alberni Inlet Trail and directly with the ACRD. And for the last several years, we've been working with the Ministry of Forests, Rec Sites and Trails BC, the ACRD, and so we've patiently been waiting for the Ministry of Forests to sign that agreement, and it looks like that's coming up here this spring. So what that will do is provide public access through our private forest management, private forest managed lands to the Scout and Laurie areas for campgrounds and camping. So less constraints there. So with that, just wanted to thank everyone for your time and certainly open to answer any questions.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Molly, for coming in today. I'll just make one small comment. I am the city-appointed director for the ACRD board, and Hole in the Wall is in the strategic plan for this term, but it was decided that the staff did not have enough capacity to work on Hole in the Wall for this year, but it is in the work plan for next year.
Oh,
So just to
wonderful.
clarify that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to work with you next year on that.
Great,
It'd be great
thanks.
to get it developed.
Excellent.
So do I have questions from council? Councillor Solda?
Hi, again, we meet again. We met each other at the AVICC, so that's what I'm referring to. So anyways, my question for you is regarding the graveyard site. I mean, that was really the logging that happened right beside all the graveyards and everything. And you actually told me that you were going to be doing something up there to help mitigate what happened, and why did those, the buffer go down? Maybe you could explain to the public, because that was really big on online and everywhere else, and that's was a big discussion in Port Alberni.
Yeah, of course. So there was a prescription to leave some trees standing there. Once equipment showed up and professionals showed up and the trees were being felled, there was certainly root rot apparent in the trees that were along that line. So to manage the safety risks, those trees were felled and removed. So certainly, you know, a different approach with, once we got in there and noticed that there was issues with root rot, we wanted to manage safety. Safety is Mosaic's leading value for our contractors, for our staff, and also for the public. So certainly didn't want to leave matured, tall Douglas fir in that area that were going to result in mortality and blowdown onto the cemetery lands or the Alberni Valley Memorial Gardens. You know, when that process was rolling out, Mosaic certainly was engaged with the owners of that site as neighbors, had lots of conversations. We've increased the size of the seedlings we planted in that area. We've grass seeded that area. The post-harvest material has been used by ADSS for firewood and chipping and salvage there. Along with cypress, 6-foot tall cypress trees. So the two owners of the Memorial Gardens both expressed gratitude and thanks for how Mosaic has addressed the scenario in planting those trees and creating a hedge in that area.
And just one more question. The owners knew about what was going to happen there in that particular area, did they not, prior to?
They did, yes.
Thank you, and that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Solda. Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for being late. There was an accident on the highway today, so my thoughts are with those people and the first responders on the highway today. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate you guys coming. So, just want to touch on Councillor Solda's comments. I have many family members that are up there, and I do appreciate the work and the tree planting that's been done there. So, do appreciate your comments and your explanation, and especially for those in the public. I have a question. It's a bit of a synergy question because we have the Industrial Heritage Society here today. And it's something that's been talked about. I'm the Industrial Heritage Society representative for council, and we talk about McLean's Mill all the time and the old time logging show. So there is a willingness for the Industrial Heritage Society to get that up and running. I don't know if you're aware or aware of the situation, but, and apologize because I'm trying to go off by memory, but there is a bit of a holdup with a couple of different players, and I believe Mosaic, part of it's on Mosaic land, if I'm not mistaken. Are you aware of the Old Time Logging Show, and do you have any idea or comments about that?
Yes, we certainly are aware of it. Over the last 2 years, we've been working closely with the city of Port Alberni and the Recreation Department around what lands the city of Port Alberni is interested in supporting. And so that's kind of as far as that's really gone. I know there's been some lots of conversation about safety, and I believe some work has happened around safety, but really since last year, there hasn't been any more information or anything shared. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure the Industrial Heritage Society is here tonight, so I'm sure if they have any questions, I'm sure they'll send you a letter or contact you through their society. So thank you very
Great,
much.
thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Dane.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thanks so much for coming today, Colin and Molly. And I just feel like I should take this opportunity to just really emphasize the importance that we have these open lines of communication and regular meetings. And I appreciate the invitation for another tour. That would be great. Yeah, I think it's important for us to see the good work that Mosaic does do in the community. As you know, there's a lot of perception out there. It can be very negative at times. There are a lot of valid concerns that have been ongoing for many years now. Things like just general. The locals want to know what exactly, how are we benefiting from Mosaic's presence in the area, and I think that's something that often comes up a little bit imbalanced, at least in the public view. So the work that you're doing to sort of communicate that is important, and to we appreciate you continuing to look at the issues that matter to us and are ongoing things. So thank you for that. And I think that's all I really had to say. So thank you.
Great, thank you for those comments, Councillor Dame, and look forward to another tour with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, another tour would be awesome. I could make the last one, but hope I can attend the next one.
Great.
Is there any other questions for Councillor Douglas?
Thank you. And thanks again for being here. And, I was at the Kofi conference last week, and Molly and I had a good discussion. And I think I got almost thrown out by security for wearing a Boston Bruins T-shirt, which I wasn't really aware of the challenge I was under there. And then I believe we talked at the AVICC. So really appreciate it. I think Mosaic has actually navigated the path of public perception quite adroitly over several years. Used to be some quite intense concerns over our watershed. I mean, there still are, but McLaughlin Ridge, and that was a much higher level of friction, I'd say, in the past. So I think the organization you've worked for, at that times you were known more as Island Timberlands, I think. But anyway, I think you've done a much better job of coming forward to our council and reaching out to our staff, so really appreciate that. I just had a couple of things. They've already been mentioned somewhat, but hole in the wall, as you know from our individual discussions, has been high up on my list. And my concern is, coming from a paramedic background, is I think we've been very fortunate that there hasn't been a fatality or serious injury accessing that site. And so what I'd like to do is, or ask, although it's a difficult question perhaps to answer here on the spot, but if there's something that perhaps our own local government, seeing as how we own property on that site, that we own fee simple, perhaps we could, if we're able to consider it, send a letter to you directly from the city of Port Alberni. The last one we sent via the ACRD. Just, suggesting that we are really concerned about the risk of injury and would like to see, a solution arrived at by all of us as soon as possible. And one of the reasons this came up, of course, was because of the work done by the cemetery and the possibility it presented and still presents of establishing an access trailhead similar to the ones that you so generously worked on Ship Creek Road on the south side of our city years ago at the head of the inlet trail. So what I'm asking is, after that long prelude, is if you could appreciate a letter, should we be able to arrive at one, in that regard, and if that might help.
Yeah, Councillor Douglas, thank you for your comments. One group that I did skip over when MLA Osborne organized the first meeting was the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Did attend those meetings, and that's certainly part of their area, obviously, is transportation and parking and the highway. So, there were a lot of different things discussed at those meetings, and so maybe there's opportunity to revisit some of those conversations and figure out what that looks like and how that piece comes to play. So, but specific to a trail to Hole in the Wall, that's something that, again, Mosaic has been waiting to hear back from the ACRD. So it probably takes a united effort to talk about the scenario given the different pieces there. So if that answers your question.
It's a step forward. Yeah, okay, so thank you. And we have had Ministry of Transport here recently and raised it
Great.
again with them, so we'll keep working. I think we all recognize the importance of that, and my fear is that the tragedy happens before we come up with a solution. So hopefully we can reverse that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was the tour, which you proffered up, and I think that would be really welcomed. Well, Councillor Dames already mentioned that, because what it really does, and further presentations by yourself, it just gives us a chance to talk. And we can talk about issues and work through issues. And like was mentioned at the Kofi conference, as we're all recognizing the need from all different sectors of society to work together to come up with innovative ideas and to make things work. So I'd really appreciate that tour as well, because it is a good opportunity for us.
Yeah, excellent. I agree as well. And, after attending the AVICC last week, certainly opportunity to connect with a few people around the table here at that event. So I agree. It's great to discuss what's going on both sides, and certainly good to get out in the field as well.
Yeah, and thanks for your work as well on the access issues. I understand something might be announced pretty soon up around Lowry Lake and that area. So it's very nice to hear. So thanks for that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. And let's go back to the AVICC discussion. Let's go back to the hole in the wall discussion. And you had alluded at the AVICC that you are not, Mosaic is not road builders. Because we were talking about the hole in the wall and let's make a parking lot and stuff like that. And you had told me that we are not road builders. It's the Ministry of Transportation's. And so what would Mosaic bring to the table if that happens and the ministry, the Ministry of Transportation? So that's really important for the public to realize it's not Mosaic. It's the Ministry of Transportation, but what would Mosaic bring to the table?
Yeah, great, thank you. And if I could just respectfully say, I'm not sure if I said we're not road builders, but we're not in the parking lot business. Yeah, so, this has been a challenging area. I'll just say when I moved to Port Alberni in 2005, people were crossing the highway in this area, same as in the photo I just showed. That's almost 20 years ago now. So, I do feel it's very important that, all the different groups come to the table to find a solution here, but specifically for Mosaic, my example with the Alberni Inlet Trail. We provide an access agreement and work with the ACRD on that. We're certainly open to discussions about a trail similar to that nature, that context, with if it's the ACRD or the City of Port Alberni or the Chamber of Commerce. It's really those. I think those discussions need to happen, but Mosaic is really here to be part of those discussions when those happen. To be part of the solution, if you will. So I hope that helps.
It does, thank you, and you are correct. Parking lot is what you said. And so it's really important to have all the people at the table so we could have these broader discussions, and I agree. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any final questions or comments? Great. Thank you, Colin, and
Great.
thank you, Molly, for coming in tonight. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Next, we have the Alberni Valley Museum and Heritage Commission. We have Ms. Fostrad and Ms. Craig in attendance to discuss the future of the Roland Arts Center. Come on up.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and councillors and city staff. It's a great opportunity, and we really appreciate this time to come and give you some information. You'll see in your packages that there are a couple of sheets of basically facts that were gathered together by our chair, Gareth Flostrand, and I really appreciate that. She's been to the dentist, so she's speaking a little crooked today. So these are her words and her collection, but I won't read it all, but I just want to highlight a few things. And the first one is the very beginning, is one of the most important things this community needs is an interest and pride in their cultural heritage. Through the arts, we strengthen bonds with each other regardless of our diverse backgrounds and build stronger communities. So we heard from various community members, the question was, what does the future hold for the Roland Arts Center Gardens and after all the construction of the beautiful childcare facility there? So now that that's finished, what are the city plans? What do you have in place? So just another reminder that heritage is our legacy from the past and we live with it every day. And what we pass on to our future generations is the care that we give to that heritage today. So a little piece of really interesting information that Gareth found was that since the formation of the Alberni Valley Art Group early in 1943 by Merwin McVicker, Ken Caulfield, and Rose Copland, there had been showings of art throughout the community, but they never had a gallery dedicated to a regular scheduled art exhibit. In the spring of 1944 at the Somas Hotel, they held their first show with Lauren Harris of the Group of Seven as their guest speaker. And on that exhibit was a one-man show by George Cloutessy. And later, a rented room over Flitton's second-hand store on 3rd Avenue, above where the CGAV used to be, was their first home. So those are the little details that many people new to our community, and maybe some of our older members don't remember. These are important things to remember our heritage of this community. So Fred and Ellen Roland owned and lived in the house that came to be known as the Roland Arts Center from 1914 to the mid-1970s. And they were known for their gardens and how beautiful they were. When Mr. Roland passed away in 1976, he left the home and gardens, which is 4 city lots, to the City of Port Alberni and the school district. In September of 1976, the Alberni Valley Art Group petitioned the city to allow them to convert the residence into a visual arts center. So that beautiful, beautiful old building became a main attraction for our community. And I think that's important to recall that that was a center of very many artists that contributed to that facility and those areas around that building. There were many, many things that happened there. Thousands and thousands of hours of volunteers to keep those gardens in the shape that they were in. And one of the main things for those gardens that people that worked there and were strong gardeners tried very hard to make sure that the trees and plants they used in there were native to BC. These are our plantings that we see around us in all of British Columbia. And one important little tidbit here was this 5 salmon sculptures carved from a 5-ton block of Kennedy Lake marble by local artist Babe Gunn. Unfortunately, one of the salmon was stolen in the early 2000s, but those kinds of pieces, I don't think many people know how connected the arts are to those gardens. So on the second page of the document that you have in your package is a list of what those garden sections had shown. They were flowers, of course, and a rose garden in particular, the Japanese garden as well, with a friendship with sister city Abashiri in Japan. So those details I want you as counselors to remember. Try and keep this piece of information. And when those plans are made now to restore those gardens after all the construction there, that you refer back to these items. And one of the things that the heritage community, as well as the arts people in our community, we're there for you. We've got the information, we know the network, we know who to get in touch with if you're wondering what those pieces are for that area. So please contact us, and we would be very available to help with any questions, to help with any research. There are items that were in those gardens that now we don't know where they are. And what are the plans, for example, for the gazebo? Is that going to be restored? Those kinds of questions, I think, need to be answered. I know the city has many wonderful people within their employee group that knows all about great gardens and the beautiful gardens that we have in our community. But we're there to give you some of the background and the history of what those items were and what needs to be restored or kept as part of those gardens. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to further conversations. We are, as I say, available to impart our knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you putting together that history. It's a lot of it I did not know, so I really appreciated that. And there was originally plans for the Community Arts Council to go back into the Roland Arts Center, but they're doing so well at Harbour Key, they want to stay there now. So that kind of threw a wrench in our plans, but I agree, we want to keep it nice and put something nice in there for people, for their community. Is there questions? Councillor Solda.
Pam and Greg, Gareth, thank you for making that presentation. Gareth, I know for many years you were in charge of the Roland Arts Center with the Arts Council. How many years was that? Just so people know they have a history.
10 years.
10 years. And so she has a lot of rich history through the arts, not just through the theater, through many musical theater and lots of things in this community, just so people have a little background. And Pam has her history with the theater and different areas in the arts. So I really appreciate some of the history. I know in the 70s I worked in the theater program at the Community Arts Council with Jan Peterson when she was in charge. So I just appreciate it. There's lots going on, and I don't know if the CAO can make any comments on that, Madam Chair, but if he has any comments regarding the future or anything like that, we're just not there yet.
That's okay, as long as you know that we're there for any information you need, and we'll keep asking and checking back. Thank you.
Perfect. We love it when you come and visit us. Did you want to add any comments to that, CEO?
Thanks. Great presentation. I didn't know any of the history, so thank you very much for that. That was great. Also, we're working with council right now to decide after we found out that the Arts Council wanted to stay at Harbour Key. We did a tour up there the other day, so council got to see the new childcare areas, and then we also walked the older part of the building and also the gardens. So I'm sure conversations will continue, and we'll get direction from on council on next steps.
Thank you again for coming forward. We appreciate it, and we appreciate the work you guys do in our community. Okay, next we have the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society Railway Operations Update. Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at the March 24th regular meeting, Council referred the railway operations update to this committee of the whole meeting this evening. And you'll notice in the report in front of you there with many, many pages of appendices as well for your enjoyment. So as it is not considered best practice to explore engaging a single year agreement with the city, the recommendation you'll note in your report there is to defer any further action regarding the operation of the railway until the completion of that business and feasibility planning project that the current ICE-T grant will be supporting the IHS on. However, staff also understands that council may be interested in enabling a shorter run for a one-year term, and staff could prepare an agreement for that period and area if council would like. On pages 11 and 12 of the report, or the agenda package, they reference the financial implications of that shorter run as proposed by the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society, and a variety of documents are attached to assist the committee in determining next steps. So representatives, of course, of the IHS are in the gallery this evening, should the committee wish to engage those folks, and I would also be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Director Thorpe? Director Mealy? Or Director Councillor Mealy?
Director, yes, I've moved up to ACRD then, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just if we do have the IHS and the APR here, I believe, before any questions that we probably would like to hear, or I would like to hear from them at least, if council would agree.
Does everyone agree that a representative from IHS can come and speak?
Yes.
Would Richard, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and everyone here. I did prepare a little something just to, after reading the report, just to clarify a few things on our part. I'd like to start by saying that the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society would support the option to enter into a one-year agreement with the City of Port Alberni to operate the Alberni Pacific Railway along the Alberni waterfront. We also look forward to the possibility of being able to enter a long-term agreement after this operating season based on the completion of the business and feasibility planning project to return rail operations out to McLean Mill. Within all this process of all the discussions that have been happening, we would like to thank city staff for being very transparent with us throughout this process, as there's been a lot of conversation back and forth, and we definitely feel like we've been kept in the loop. So we'd like to thank city staff for all that. One of the things that has been noted in the staff report is about technical safety. Now, the IHS has been working very closely with technical safety to meet all the action items needed prior to restarting rail activity. We are nearing the completion and sign-off of our safety management system, which is the first major step. There are 4 other action items on the list, such as providing a scope of operations letter and updated proof of inspections and qualification, which will be completed once direction from council as to the scope of operations is given. And now most of that work has been completed or nearing completion, so there's a very, very short timeline on all that once council makes their decision. We feel that operating along the short track of the Alberni waterfront for this year can provide the community an exciting and educational community-focused attraction that will help build the experience on the waterfront. Our vision is not only to provide the waterfront round-trip service for the community, but also other forms of service with the number 102 logging cruise speeder working alongside the Harbour Quay, Key-to-Key Pathway, Somas Lands Development, and the Alberni Pacific Railway Roundhouse Museum. So we're excited to see a lot of growth in that area, and we're very excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming up. And I want to acknowledge the IAHS and their volunteers and really recognize and applaud your efforts and how much work that you've done. It's probably the most work that we have seen done since I've been on council anyway, and everything that we've asked you to do, you've done. So I really want to recognize and acknowledge that work that you've committed to. Any questions? No, from council. Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question regarding money for financing, and through the chair, maybe we could get someone to answer where the money would be coming out of, because we've been working on our taxes.
CAO, can you respond to that? Or do you want Andrew to come and answer?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. I can try, and if I get the funding wrong, then Andrew can. It would really be up to council, but I know that we do have some funds left in the community, so the funding could come out of that area. I also believe that the community forestry reserve was also mentioned, and I believe that was the two parts that we can take the funding from. So that would be, I believe on option 3 explains the full costs, and that would be 113,935 in capital funding and 60,000 in the operating funding. And of course, as administration always does, if we can bring the capital costs down, we will.
Thank you. Councillor Damon, then Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I fully agree with your remarks that what the IHS has accomplished so far has been very impressive and good to see, and that's much appreciated. I do continue to have some concerns regarding just the certainty of some of the numbers involved and stuff, and so I am most comfortable deferring it. However, I would like to have a really just a clear picture of how that affects the timeline if we were to defer, as the motion, recommended motion suggests. So I'm not sure who would be best to answer that question, but.
CEO.
Thanks for the question. I can take a crack, and if Willa feels like adding in something, I would welcome her to. So if we did do the option 1, that would be until the completion of the business plan and feasibility project. That's for the full track. That's the one that was granted by ICE-T. This has been administration's looking at the long term and the asset management part for the whole, for a longer term viable rail system. And then through the discussions, I know council asked about a short track option, and IHS went away and looked at that. So if option 1 was, it would be until next year's budget. So there wouldn't be rail this year down on the waterfront.
Did I answer your question, Councillor Dame? Go ahead.
It does, thank you. And as much as I would love to see this happen sooner rather than later, I must admit that I am more comfortable waiting for those firm numbers and a more clear idea of what that would look like. So that's going to be my preference for now and what I support. Thanks.
Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to IHS for coming tonight. Thank you very much for the staff report. A lot of information, as you said, a lot of appendices, so that's good. So the first question was, just like Councillor Solda, was where is the money going to come from? Growing community fund. The second question is about the insurance, I guess. $60,000. I know we talked about perhaps having it under the umbrella of the city or reducing that cost in some way. Is that still a possibility at this point?
CEO.
Thanks for the question. And through the chair, we have reached out to our insurance company. What we're doing now with actually both insurance companies is just confirming the environmental part of the insurance. So once we have that solidified, then we'll take the best option. And if IHS's quote is the better option, then we'll go with that. And if MIA's is better, then we would probably go with that. But again, we are just at the final stages of that. So if we get direction to move forward with an agreement, we would work diligently on finalizing that.
Go ahead.
If I may continue, Madam Mayor, or Madam Acting Mayor, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I do want to acknowledge the IHS's work to this point as well as Madam Chair did. I do hear the concerns of my fellow councillors as well, Councillor Dame, and I know Councillor Patola as well had concerns. I know he's not here tonight, but it wouldn't be fair not to include him in that as well, because that is his concern. I still think that a one-year agreement to have our rail going is something we can do. I totally believe that, you know, if especially we're pulling out of the Growing Communities Fund, you know, we put $1.2 million to the Key to Key. At this point, all I'm asking is for about $100,000 out of that for the opportunity to let the IHS and the APR run and see what we can do. Also, again, and some of the councillors was with me at the time when we heard Honourable Rob Fleming talk on Sunday, when he said one of the things we want to do in infrastructure and transportation is restore Island Rail, which got a rousing applause. So it seems like the support is there. Now, I know we're only talking about the first section, but if we're going to look long term, and if that is a viable option, then our section is the last section towards a deep sea port. So I think that's also something that we can look forward to if there's a government will, which there seems to be at this point. So I know that's really long way down the way, but that is something. Also, too, I will also say we did talk about the steam train going to a static display at the train station, and if the train tracks are finished and done, that is part of. It will save the community money rather than having to find a way to take that train else, you know, cranes or however it's going to work to get there. So, and the last thing I'll say is we talk all the time about this community, Folk Fest, needed new blood, couldn't run Canada Day. Salmon Fest, we have a derby because they needed new blood and couldn't get it. Fall Fair almost had a hard time putting their Fall Fair together this last year because we had the volunteers. We have young blood here for the APR, and I truly believe it's an opportunity for us to give them a 1-year shot at it and give them the opportunity, and I think that's just what they need, is just to give them a chance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Solda.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm kind of curious on one part of the budget, though. You have a, maybe somebody from the IHS could answer that regarding, you have a manager for $1,000 and you have staff for $10,000. So how is that working? I believe Councillor Dame had pointed that out earlier today. So why 1,000 only for a manager? Is somebody volunteering, or how's that working?
Yeah, come on up, Richard.
So unfortunately, I forgot to bring the budget with me, but I believe that there was 2 budgets created, and I believe the $10,000 for staffing was in the original one that we presented to council for steam train and the full operations, and then the revised one only showed 1,000 for the manager. Now, what we've sort of realized, initially the manager was going to be a volunteer position, and we had people that were capable and competent to do that. However, we found out that it is a big effort trying to make sure that we're meeting all the requirements with technical safety and then adding some money in for marketing, so to make sure that's being done properly as well. So that's initially just a stipend for that manager to be able to provide them some time out of their day to make sure that that work gets done. And as far as I remember, I don't believe there was any funds in the revised budget for any staffing.
Thank you, and that's what I thought. It was probably a stipend or something like that. And regarding Island Rail, yes, at the AVICC there was discussion about Island Rail and how it's going to go from north to south, but it probably, on the committee, when I was on that years ago, they said they weren't going to come to Port Alberni, and if they do, it'll be a miracle. So they're just worried about north and south at this moment, just so we don't get it and think, oh, we're going to get rail here. I'm on the fence on this because I do want to see it happen, but I also want to go with the staff recommendation. So it's going to be interesting to hear the rest of council, and even if Mayor Minions has her hand up too. So that's be interesting to hear that opinion too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Minions and then Councillor Douglas. Go ahead, Mayor Minions. Mayor Minions, are you ready to speak? Are you able to speak, Shari? I think you're muted now, Mayor Minions, if you want to speak.
I think if she wanted to call in, we could do it that way as well. It's starting to seem like it might be something on our end, if we can't get several people, so,
She says she's not enabled to speak.
okay. Yeah, so it must be something on our end then.
Okay.
Yeah, because I can see back there trying to get it going, but it's not working, so maybe if she could.
There we go. I just got access.
Oh, there
Okay,
you
good.
are. Yay, we got you. Go ahead.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Just a few comments, and I wanted to just start by saying I know that this is a really challenging decision for council, largely because I think we are in a position, unfortunately, where we're being asked to proceed with something where we really don't have all the information in front of us that we should in order to make the best possible informed decision. I really see this as a bit of a leap of faith. And this is a service that is not a new service. It was stopped because it was stopped really a few years ago for a number of reasons, but one of them was because we wanted a plan really like what we're being provided today. It's not a perfect plan, but it is a whole lot more than we've had in the past. When we did stop the train funding a number of years ago, I really saw it as because we couldn't get any of the information that we needed, and we didn't have something that we thought was a viable business plan. And what I see in front of us today, I would say, is very much the start of a viable business plan, and not only. Yes, there's information missing, but not only is there, a lot more than we've had in the past, but I think the key difference is we're looking at a much more affordable operation focused on the community, not with big hopes and goals of, how many tens of thousands of tourists we're going to bring to town. I think we all would love to believe that that's going to happen, but we've tried in the past. It hasn't happened. And I think it's a model that personally I don't want to invest in anymore until we see a bit more concrete evidence that there's a possibility of it. But what I do want to invest in is recreation and activities for our community's families. And that's what I see this as. So I guess I just want to echo a lot of what Councillor Mealy just said. And while, I do appreciate the concerns coming from council that it is not a perfect plan, I don't want to diminish or take away from that at all. You guys are right. There's more work to be done, but I feel like we can do the work and we can make this happen at some point this year. So I would like to proceed with taking a bit of a leap of faith here and trying to make this work, recognizing all of the work that's been done, and also building off of the positive relationship that the representatives specifically from APR and IHS have working with our staff right now. I think that's another thing we haven't necessarily had in the past. So I'm really pleased with where we're at. I know there's more work to be done. I would like to support this initiative personally in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. And I echo the same sentiments as our mayor and Councillor Mealy, and also empathized with the positions that we're all in as far as, making judgment calls on budget time. And I just repeat the same points. This isn't a new service. It's been in existence for decades, and decades of long, hard volunteer work have gone into the society that's carried it out. It's got existing infrastructure. It's not brand new infrastructure. It's there. The rails are there. Admittedly, there's work that has to be done and safety issues that have to be looked after. But I'd like to see us endorse option 3 and let it proceed to the council chambers at our next council meeting, and then have more discussions if necessary, and make a decision so these hardworking folks can get on with this initiative. Thank you.
Are you making that motion, Councillor Douglas?
So moved, and if I can get a seconder, we could discuss it a bit more if like.
Moved by Councillor Douglas, second by Councillor Mealy. Questions or comments?
Well, just a little more of the same, and a little bit of background too. I know we were all at a convention where there was quite a bit of support for rail on the island. Quite frankly, I think there's a analogy between something called a snowball in a very hot place, and I think that applies to the concept of rail on the island coming back in the near future. But I think it's the opposite when it comes to a waterfront short rail initiative here on the waterfront in Port Alberni that'll help celebrate all the waterfront initiatives that we are doing down there, and it'll give these folks a chance to get started again with a, a proper business plan and appropriate safety issues. And then when time comes, maybe we can expand, and if we get McLean Mill together, it can go out there as well. So I think it's a really good initiative. I really appreciate the work that's been done so far. So thanks, folks.
I think you have a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of a lot of partnerships and collaborations with businesses and the community. So I hope you get to do some brainstorming one night and get people to work with you and come up with these fantastic ideas to work to make things happen. And more events is always better. Councillor Dane.
Thank you. Just before we go to a vote, I just want to reiterate that I am going to oppose this motion, but I want to make it clear that that's not because I'm opposed to the train or the work that's being done. It's simply that I'm in favor of taking the time to make sure that we have all the information that we need to make sure that it's a success for all parties involved. And so that's why I'm opposed. I am otherwise very excited about the potential for our community that this brings. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for coming in tonight. Okay, next on the agenda is the addition Port Pub update. Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Chair, I'm just kind of curious to know what's happening with Port Pub. You drive by there right now and you'll see about, in the empty parking lot on the side, there's about 6 bikes that are taken apart and their tires are off or handlebars are off. It's starting to look really messy down there, and I'm sure the bikes don't belong to all the tenants that are resident in Port Pub, but it's just around the whole building is starting to look a little like a garbage, a lot of garbage. And I'm just kind of curious to know where we are with the building for the public to have that knowledge. Thank you.
CEO.
Yeah, thank you for the question. City continues to enact the remedial order. There continues to be a fire watch there that is been under a fire order since the alarm system isn't fully functioning. Also, just last week, part of the remedial order was to get an architect and an engineer to review the structure. And that took place last week. So we will have some costs and some more information coming forward to a future meeting with some options for council on how to move forward. I will also say we will be cleaning up the public spaces around the Port Pub and trying to keep it clean. I did notice that today myself. But really besides that, there isn't much else that I can update on. I know that it is deteriorating, but again, we are doing what we can do at this time.
Councillor Solda, go ahead.
Thank you for that report. I'm glad that we're going to clean up, because if we don't clean up, it's going to get worse, and it's not going to be, it's not fair for the businesses that are around that area, and so I'm really happy about that, and hopefully we can keep it clean. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next is quarterly departmental reports, and it's my understanding this is going to be on a rotating basis, so that's fantastic. I think Councillor Solda and I have been asking for this for a few years, so it's fantastic to see you coming here. So we're going to have quarterly reports, firstly from the Economic Development Department. So if you could ask Mr. Deacon to come on up and give your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, committee members. So the report does span the first quarter of this year, so January 1st to March 31st. And it really describes in short order the major accomplishments that I feel we have made, along with the business retention, business attraction initiatives. I have also for the committee's consideration identified the meetings that I'm attending in the various capacities that take place. So a liaison is simply that I attend the meetings. If there's a question about the city's participation in, for example, a chamber or the Alberni Pacific Railway Advisory Group, I respond if I'm able or bring a question back. A member usually indicates that we're paying for belonging to that group and participation in it. And if I'm on the committee, I'm really endeavoring either to contribute more or learn more about the situation. And there's only one instance where I'm on the board, and that's the Economic Developers Association of Canada. The report also covers off the grant applications that we've made over this period of time and provides a budget overview. And as that indicates, I held back on making any commitments in marketing or the consulting realm while council debated the budget, because I thought that there's always a chance that council might decide to pull some of that money back. I'm thrilled that you haven't, and we will be investing both in the marketing of the community and in some of the consulting work as we go forward. So that is my report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about any component of it.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Mr. Deacon. Appreciate that report. It's been a long time coming for me and for, I'm sure, the rest. So my question is, once the budget is passed, we still have businesses out there wondering what can we do for the local businesses. We used to have the facade program and different things. So what do you have up your sleeve for that? Can you let it out the bag and so the public can hear and the businesses? Because some of them are really hurting and they want to do other things outside of their building and do a little more. So what can we do for them?
Right. So in Now, Next, Later, now covering the period April 1st to June 30th, there's an indication that I am bringing forward for council's consideration alternatives or reconsideration of the facade improvement program. So that report is in a draft form, and it will come forward with several options for council to consider in terms of that investment.
And just one more question. So you're going to bring that forward, but will there be anything, we used to have one if the people wanted to put cameras up because there's a lot of theft going around in our community in the stores, recognizing that. Is there anything to help people to purchase cameras, especially the new businesses who have probably might not have any cameras in that?
There is an option in the report. There's also notice that the provincial government has a program that is more generous than any we've been able to offer there. So I'm speaking off the top of my mind right now, but it's a total of $3,000 that is available, with $2,000 being available to address graffiti and other damage that's been done to buildings, and I think $1,000 for video. But having said that, I put forward as an option for council that they may want to invest or reinvest in a community safety program like what had been done a few years ago.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that report. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. I just want to thank you for all the good work that you do for this community, and let you know that every time I go out of town, I always get a comment from someone, you have a great economic development manager in Port Alberni, so thank you for such a good reputation. Yeah, so. Any final
Thank you.
questions?
I honestly believe that the relationship building that we've been able to do with agencies and communities and organizations is a good part of the reason why Port Alberni was chosen as one of 3 communities to be showcased to Global Affairs Canada staff and their Invest in Canada initiative. And more will be coming forward to council about that as well.
Any final questions or comments before I let him go? Great, thank you so much for coming in today, Pat. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next is corporate services. Are you going to start, Sarah? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to provide council with an overview of departmental operations for the quarter ending March 31st, 2024. The Corporate Services Department is comprised of a number of areas, including legislative services, communications, public engagement support, access to records and information, community safety and social development, bylaw services, community policing, and elections. The city is working hard to expand on the goals and priorities of Council's corporate strategic plan, which focuses on attracting new businesses and growing our economy while ensuring that residents continue to access day-to-day services. In the first quarter, Corporate Services has facilitated in the preparation of 6 regular meetings of Council, 7 special meetings of Council, 1 public hearing, and 6 Committee of the Whole meetings. Within that, the directives that came out in the summary of council resolutions captured 159 directives of council during the first quarter, 21 of which are in progress or remain outstanding. Since January 1st, the Communications Department has been actively engaged in various activities to enhance public outreach and engagement, including updates via social media and media releases. The CAO, directors, and mayor conducted several media interviews covering a range of topics, including the financial plan, SOMAS lands updates, the OCP process, and other issues that have arisen since the beginning of the year. Bylaw Services Department has been operating with 1 bylaw officer since February. The number of calls that were successfully responded to was significant, given the reduction in staff. The total number of calls for Q1 is 217, compared to 247 in quarter 1 for 2023. Under community policing, some key activities include an environmental scan of other communities' community policing and safety programs to understand what is working in their communities. This information will be used to report to council on future community safety programs and strategies in the second quarter. An enhanced crime watch pilot model was initiated, designed to deliver a foot patrol presence in the uptown core. Volunteers were trained to patrol the business district first by vehicle and then on foot, interacting with businesses and public, promoting public safety. The pilot was well received and has subsequently been added to the core programming in mid-March. Training will be ongoing over the coming weeks for all volunteers, as the goal is to make Enhanced Crime Watch one of the core program activities based out of the Public Safety Building. In 2023, Social Development collaborated with the Community Action Team to bring forward the blueprint of transformative strategies to the toxic drugs catastrophe for endorsement by Council alongside the Sashot Nation Toxic Drug Strategy. The department will continue to collaborate and engage with community partners on these initiatives. The Situation Table was also launched, a risk-based, collaborative, rapid triage model focusing on upstream interventions to connect individuals and families facing situations of acutely elevated levels of risks, as seen across multiple agency lenses, to the services that they need immediately. The Social Solutions Political Working Group was established to focus on stabilization services and is underway. And there will be a gap analysis workshop in the coming weeks to develop a community well-being and safety strategy. The first quarter of 2024 demonstrated the Corporate Services Department's commitment to excellence in serving the residents of Port Alberni. The department continues to grow and evolve to meet converging issues in the city and respond to council direction. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also have Mary Claire in attendance. Did you have specific questions related to community safety and social development?
Thank you. I'll start because I do have a question. I didn't realize we were down to one bylaw officer. Are they on leave or did they leave the city?
Thank you for the question. They just are off work currently. We're expecting them to be back at some point.
Councillor Solda?
Just a quick question about community policing. So we have 30 volunteers at the moment. And so anybody that's watching us, how do they become a volunteer and what do they do? So maybe that could be, and is it, yeah, so let's go with that one first.
I think we'll get the manager of safety and social development to come up and answer that.
How are you, Mary Claire?
Thank you for that question. There's a number of ways to get involved. You can come by our community policing office on 3rd Avenue. There's a Facebook page, and we're quite active on the city website as well, and on the RCMP website.
Go ahead.
So my other question is regarding bylaws, when you get a call from a member of public, so just so the public can understand, so you get a call, how much time does the bylaw officer spend on that one file? So people think, oh, well, I can call them anytime and they'll be right out there. It doesn't always work that way, so.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, it depends. And the reason I say that is, for example, if we get a call about a homeless encampment, I'll use that as an example. The bylaw officer will attend and assess the situation, meet with the individuals. Our focus, and this is also in the report, is really on a humans first approach rather than just an enforcement approach. And sometimes those calls to try to get those individuals into appropriate housing with outreach workers can take 1 to 3 weeks. If we get a call about garbage in a illegal dumping, for example, that can take several days to get in touch with the property managers. Depending on whether they live here or outside of town. So it really varies. And we have to prioritize, of course, because we have the one bylaw officer. But I think that we do a really good job of maintaining what we can, given the volume of calls that we get. So I hope that answers and gives you some scope.
It does. But the other question too will be, so we don't have eyes behind our heads. So how do we, I know the answer, but the public might not know. And there has been some discussion with the public on this. how, if we see something wrong or we need to call someone, how do we do that? What are the steps in the procedure?
The best way to do it is to contact us at the Public Safety Office. You can either phone, come in person, or fill in the online form. And then we respond accordingly right away. And all of those calls are logged and tracked, and we review the ongoing log on a daily basis to determine where they're at today, how much progress has been made. And usually they're not as simple as just send somebody out to fix it. They're usually a bit more complicated than that. Graffiti can be a prime example. And so we're always working on a prioritization, and health and safety is our number one priority. And then based on that, we then assess all of the various calls. So at any given time, I believe in the report, it says that at any given time, we've got about 60 active files, 50 to 60 active files, but that goes up and down on a daily basis.
So people just need to be patient. It's not going to happen right away that you're going to be out there unless it's health and safety. So thank you very much for your report.
I just want to commend your department for taking that humans first approach versus a bylaw enforcement approach. I think that's fantastic. I appreciate that. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for coming, Madam Director. Appreciate it. I was just going to say the same thing, just the human first approach. And if I'm not mistaken, it was something that Councillor Douglas talked about last year and the changes. And I think we can see those numbers, 96 tickets last year in this quarter and 35 this year. So moving along, I would assume it's voluntary compliance first and allowing people to fix it on their own, which is a lot better than the adversarial way, which again, I could go back to Councillor Douglas talking about it last year. So I do appreciate that. And especially when it comes to, homeless encampments and that is these are people that still are part of our community and still need to, and as we drove through Victoria this past weekend, we can see, it's been a really long time since I've been to Victoria and it is exponentially worse now downtown. And I was trying to find a friend of mine who I went to school with, and it's tough to see that. And so we're all humans, and so taking that human approach, I really do appreciate that from the bylaw enforcement side. And then just a comment, just for people online who are watching this, the report is part of our agenda package, so you can view the entire report and the numbers and all that, the view PDF file through the City of Port Alberni website. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Director.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, if I could just briefly, thank you again. Just a little query, really, and I know this is probably tied into the Traffic Advisory Committee more so than just your department, but it wasn't too long ago that we recognized the need for a speed limit sign on Stamp Avenue, and we installed one on each direction. And I have noticed actually that traffic does actually seem to have slowed down a little bit, but we still seem to have this mentality that a speed limit means that we can go that fast rather than just go, at a reasonable speed. Everybody still seems to speed there, and I'm just wondering how we decide when we're sending out our volunteers to show people how fast they're going. Like, how do we decide what part of the community where they're going to be going and setting up their sign? I imagine they have to have enough space, of course, to do it safely. But it'd be nice to see a little bit more of that on that one section of Stamp, because like myself, and I know a lot of other people that are cyclists in the community, and it's still quite a bit of a freeway down there. So that was really just, I guess, more of a comment, although the question was, like, how do we sort of choose those sites, and just encouraging us to do a little bit more of that. Because I think, our community and throughout Canada, Western society, we drive faster than we need to get to where we're going. So it's nice to, again, just try that education approach of educating people rather than then finding out when they hit a person what a horrible event it is. Educate them to drive in a safer manner. So, yeah, just that one question, if you don't mind, about how do you choose a location? Thanks.
Not at all. Thank you for the question. The prioritization is done in a number of different ways. The community policing manager works really closely with the RCMP to align the crime watch and speeding and distracted driving. And so there would be certain target areas that they would determine. And then when we get information like this, we pass it along. So, so they're always very fluid. And if I may, just picking up on Councillor Mealy's comment, and also your comment, Councillor Douglas, is also that we really focus on an education approach and to get voluntary compliance. And this also goes back to Councillor Solda's comment about how much time does it take? Well, these things take more time, but in the end, we have a better approach and what we feel is a better approach. So, yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. And again, Traffic Advisory Commission, we do accept volunteers now and then, and they are public meetings that people can attend. So just want to remind people to, maybe Councillor Mealy would like to mention that.
Go ahead, Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Yes, the next meeting is 10 o'clock on Wednesday. So come on down to the Advisory Traffic Commission, or again, if you would like to volunteer for Speed Watch or the community policing, come on down to the community safety building, or Mr. Kusan is always around the community, so grab them while you can.
Any final questions? Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mary Claire, for your reports. Next, we have the fire department, and ironically, Chief Owens is at a fire. So the CAO is going to give the fire department report.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope they're doing well down there. I know that it was a long distance to the nearest fire hydrant, so it took them a little bit to set up, but I'm sure they're actively fighting it down there currently. So this is the first time I've seen the PowerPoint, but I am aware of some of it, so I will talk to the slides as best as I can on behalf of Chief Owens. But if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to email the City Hall or the fire department or myself, and we will get back to you. So the overview on the slides, it looks like we're looking at the stats and then the communication, fire prevention, and looking ahead. And I really want to focus in on the stats as council has been advocating for our fire department and has taken several successful resolutions to AVICC, and they will be continuing on to UBCM. So I want to thank council for representing the fire department on that, and also the fire department for the work on preparing all that. So as you can see, our stats continue to go up throughout the years. And if you look at it, it's mainly in the medical first responders column. Again, you can see that our motor vehicles year over year are pretty constant, and that's same with the structural fires seem to be within a certain range. But the big increase in the stats are on the medical first responders, which we notice, and that is across Canada, but is a big issue and a big burden on the fire departments. Communications, again, the fire department tries to communicate as soon as an incident happens. To keep public aware, and also tries to let everybody know when it's okay to return when they get back to the station. Sometimes they're a little bit faster than the other media sources out there on letting you know the road's back open. So I would encourage everybody to follow them on X or Facebook. And again, as you can see, there are lots of followers on there that keep in touch with our fire department through that manner. Fire prevention is a busy department and is helping the community be safer in many ways. You can see that they do a lot of fire inspections and also a lot of individual inspections of common places in multi multi-unit development. So Fire Smart is also a key part to the fire department. I know that if there is a complaint for a fire or a burning of anything, the fire department will respond. The first, they do try and warn and educate people, but then they do fine if it's an ongoing item. So you can see that through the Fire Smart Assessments, they will come to your property with ACRD. It's a combined effort, and they'll make sure to tell you all the tips and tricks to make sure if a fire is in our community that your house is safe. And also back on the fire pit idea, there is information on their website to explain the rules and regulations around having a campfire. Oh.
Chief Owens, welcome. Come on in.
And looking ahead, Chief Owens is here to finish off his report.
Welcome.
Hello. Are we at the top of this slide? I literally don't know where we are. Okay. Yeah, so we've been working on wildfire risk reduction for the coming season. Obviously liaising with the RCMPs. So we've had issues in the past where sometimes the fires will be malicious in nature, and so the RCMP just wants to be advised on that as soon as the calls come in so that they can arrive expeditiously, and if there is people observing the fire or fleeing the scene, then they have an opportunity to engage there. We've also been doing some proactive work with parks and bylaw as well as the ACRD. So we just completed some danger tree assessment training, and I understand that the Parks Department also engaged in similar training within Dry Creek and Roger Creek parks. So that's been going on. The new aerial, which you can see in the photo there, just arrived just last Thursday. So now we're just engaging in training with that, just getting all of our firefighters up to speed. The Fire Safe program is actually a really interesting program. It's being led by the Office of the Fire Commissioner. So they've identified a number of communities and areas within communities that are higher risk. And essentially what will happen with the Fire Safe program is Port Alberni firefighters will go door to door and ask if they can come in to have a look to make sure that the smoke alarms within the homes are working. And if they need to have their smoke alarms replaced, the Office of the Fire Commissioner and the Province of British Columbia has actually donated, I think it was 3.5 pallets of fire alarms for us to install in people's residences who wish to engage in the program. It's voluntary. So I think that'll be a really good opportunity for us to just have some community outreach, and of course, if just one person has a smoke alarm and that smoke alarm alerts them to a fire and they're able to exit safely, then the program is well worth it. The dialogue with BCAHS, I understand that you guys were at AVICC just over this past number of days. And so some of this dialogue is just it's really preliminary dialogue, I would say, at this point. But it's looking at what are the calls that Port Alberni Fire Department is currently responding to that were not affecting patient outcomes. And so once we gather that data, then it'll be something that we can come back to council with and talk about if we should continue to go to calls that we don't actually have a positive impact to patient outcomes. Of course, in this data collection stage right now, and we have agreements with Sachot and Hupetchessit. And so, of course, we would need to engage with the nations prior to actually making any decisions to service levels there. Is that the last slide? I don't even know.
Hey, good timing.
I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions for Chief Owens? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Chief. Or thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief. I saw the Chief this morning at about 7:30 in the morning, so you've had a long day. I waved at you this morning, so kudos to you, sir, and all the hard work that you do. I just had we were at the AVICC, we're just talking about that, and so I went to the BC Wildfire seminar, and it was very informative. There was something that came out which is something, and I'm not, you don't expect an answer today or anything like that, but we've had broom busters come to the community or come to council, and one of the things that one of the people on the BC Wildfire said that, and I believe she was in Gibson's, said that the fire department will offer a 1-day burn for broom busters. They will not burn for anybody else during between April and September, I believe it is. But for the broom busters, they will have one controlled fire. So if anybody had the broom and they wanted to bring it, Scotch broom, and bring it down, that the fire department would burn for the community. You don't have to answer right now, but if that's something that we would consider in the future. And the reason why I just say this, and I probably wouldn't have asked the question if you weren't here, Chief, so I'm sorry for that. But it was something that came up in the BC Wildfire seminar, so I just thought it was an idea. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, Chief Owens?
Yeah, I think it's something that we could consider, although my preference would always be that there's other methods to dispose of organic materials. And I just, my first blush impression would just be that we want to be leading by example, and we don't allow burning within the city of other organic materials, so you can't burn your yard waste within the community. We only allow for clean, dry firewood to be burned, and in part that's to protect the air shed as well. And so I think that I would want to explore all other opportunities that might be out there for disposing of organics before we entertain that. So yeah, I think that's where I'd be at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Just a little more on the wildfire aspect as well. They talked about some programs, fireproofing your home from a wildfire perspective. Maybe if you're living more on the perimeter of the community next to the forest. And I was wondering, do we offer any of that, or do we help liaise? If people have concerns, we can help send them on to the appropriate sources for that sort of information.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I was just talking about Fire Safe. There's also a program called Fire Smart. And the Fire Smart program, we partner with the ACRD on. And so anybody within the city limits that wants to fire safe their property, we'll send a Port Alberni firefighter out that's been trained to assist in evaluating what the concerns might be, how they might fortify their property, I suppose is the best way to put it, against wildfires that could be coming towards their property or the community. And then there's also grant money that's available for property owners. Once you've completed your assessment, then the assessor can speak more eloquently to this than I can in the moment. But if they carry out certain work that fits within the prescription that the Fire Smart assessor has provided them, then they can actually get a rebate on some of the value of either their own sweat equity, or if they were to hire a contractor to clean up their property, something of the like.
And just one more along the same lines about wildfires. Most people are probably aware by now that the community, although it's rather spread out along Franklin Road from the city boundary at Ship Creek Road, does not have protective fire service. They used to have one with the city of Port Alberni, but no longer. I'm just wondering what sort of machinery we have, and I don't mean machinery, I mean logistics or arrangements. Do we have should a wildfire break out, partway down Franklin Road and pose a danger, would our city fire department have the mechanics to play a role in that, or would it be basically we'd be looking at the province to come in?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so being that it's outside of the city, it would be the primary responsibility would lie with BC Wildfire. We have previously had fires in that area that we believe to be a threat to the city. The fire control bylaw does allow for the City of Port Alberni Fire Department to respond to incidents that are outside of the city if it is deemed to be to the benefit of the city to do so. And so kind of in a nutshell, what that means is that if there's a belief that a fire that was occurring in that area could come into the city, then we will engage that fire before it hits the city boundary. We also have an excellent working relationship with BC Wildfire. And so from time to time, in fact, just after the heat dome, there was a motor vehicle fire that was on Franklin River Road. It was spreading into the bush. It was outside of fire protection. While we were responding to it, we called BC Wildfire. They issued us a fire number. And so we were able to recoup all of our costs and be insured through them for that event, just as one example that happens to be on that road.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments? Great. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. Next on the agenda is a report from the Director of Corporate Services for the committee to consider a policy regarding release of in-camera resolutions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the report before you requests consideration of the draft release of in-camera resolutions policy. Although the community charter specifies circumstances under which council meetings may be closed to the public, council wishes to conduct the governance of the city in a manner which is as transparent and accountable as possible. Consequently, the policy is intended to provide direction on the public disclosure of business conducted in closed council meetings, where such disclosure may be possible without contravention of legislative requirements or the creation of harmful effects upon the municipality. Council presently releases in-camera resolutions under the guidance of the Community Charter and as per the Council Procedures Bylaw, which requires that the release of confidential deliberations and information requires specific authorization from Council through a resolution. Where possible, Council is expected to report on any business conducted in a closed meeting at the next regular Council meeting. The decision to release in-camera information is at the discretion of the Council based on advice from the Chief Administrative Officer or Legal Counsel. Administration presently provides a summary of in-camera resolutions, which Council is provided on a quarterly basis for review. Staff are recommending that the committee recommend that Council approve policy number 3002-6. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, would someone like to make the motion? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve policy number 3002-6, release of in-camera resolutions.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think just more along the lines of any chance we can get to be open and transparent. I know there are things, labor, land, and law that we have to have in camera, obviously for protection, but any chance that we can to be transparent and open with our constituents is a good thing.
Thank you for that. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is the official community plan update, and we have a report from the manager of planning providing the official community plan growth and climate action what we heard report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we're going to do a bit of a tag team if we can get the technology to work, and it's always a test. But Kelly Leonard from Frank Planning is who is our consultant assisting with our official community plan. Has been really helpful with staff to do the public engagement that we have done over the first few months of this year. And we're here to report back essentially what we heard. So Kelly will give a bit of an overview of what we heard, what we engaged with, how we engaged on that, and then I will kind of follow up with a little more additions at the end, and then we'll be available for questions. And so, Kelly, if you can start going through, and I can advance the slides as we go, and then we can move forward.
Great, thank you, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good, okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, Council. Tonight, as Scott mentioned, we'll be presenting the results of the February-March engagement on the official community plan. The purpose of the presentation tonight, Scott, next slide, will be to provide an overview of the engagement approach and the outcomes from that engagement. And then Director Smith will speak to the staff report. So just a quick reminder of the Port Alberni OCP process overall. We're in the ideas phase right now. So we'll be wrapping that up very soon and moving into the policy development phase. So that's taking all the ideas gathered and the engagement outcomes from the ideas phase and start to develop the policy that will then inform the actual document of the official community plan. And then in the fall, we'll be coming back to the public to engage on the draft plan as well as with council before we get into the process where council will consider the official community plan in approximately November. So we wanted to share the variety of tactics that we use to get the word out about engagement in February and March. And that's on page 4 of the What We Heard report. We launched a campaign for communications in January, early January, and it ran until late February. We used 12 different tactics, and we estimate that there was a possibility of 76,000 possible touch points. So to get the word out in that many ways, according to the different tactics that we used and their metrics that they use in terms of how they get the word out and how many folks they think that they have communication with. So the purpose of this engagement phase was to understand the public's ideas and levels of support for 2 key topics. The first is, how is Port Alberni going to grow from now till 2042? What are the opportunities for growth? What kind of concerns does the community have? Are there any additional ideas, any questions about growth? And then we also engaged on climate mitigation and adaptation. So what levels of support did the community have for that? And what ideas would the community have around climate action in the community? We implemented a number of engagement tactics in order to gather those ideas on those 2 key topics. We used 11 different ways, and we had both in-person and online opportunities. We had 2 in-person public events. We engaged at North Island College. We engaged 5 elementary and high school classes. And then we also had 2 focused workshops. Of the total of the participants, we had a good proportion that was under 30. And so that reflected what we heard from council earlier this year, that the importance of engaging youth on this plan, because in 20 years, this will be there will be their community in Port Alberni. We also had a good split in the participants online and at in-person events, and this does not include the schools. So we had about 42% of folks that engaged were long-term residents, so over 21 years. And then 35% were fairly new residents, so under 5 years. We had about a 50% split of those that were employed full-time and those that were either retired or employed part-time or stay-at-home parents or students. And then we had a fairly even representation of male and female demographic, and then a very small representation of those that identified as non-binary or other. So overall, we had over 330 participants in this phase of engagement. So I'm going to just present briefly on the engagement outcomes for the youth, and then I'll go into the public and then the focused engagement with the workshops that we did. So in terms of youth engagement, we engaged 5 classes and we had some, I just have to commend the youth in Port Alberni. You know, they shared some amazing thoughts and ideas and really interesting conversations that we had with them. We went into the classrooms. And the first thing we did is we presented information on growth in Port Alberni. So we know that we're going to be expecting a certain population, and that means we're going to need to figure out how are we going to house these new folks and the existing residents as well. How will we move around, those kind of things. Oh, Scott, I think you skipped a slide, went ahead there. Thank you. And so we talked about growth in Port Alberni and had discussions around that. And then we asked the students, what do you like about living in Port Alberni and what might need to change, what's missing, or what don't you like about living in Port Alberni? And the most frequently mentioned ideas, we compiled all the ideas, all the results. The most frequently mentioned for what students like about living in Port Alberni related to the environment, access to natural areas. Socially, the small town feel was really frequently mentioned. And then economically, the local shops, students loved the uniqueness of some of the local shops in town. And then what don't you like about living in Port Alberni or what needs to change? Most frequently mentioned was students don't feel safe or have safe places to go in the community. They recognize or have witnessed that there's homeless and addiction issues that need to be addressed. And then economically, kind of the flip side of the what they like about living in Port Alberni was there's a frequently mentioned need for a mall, so they have a place to gather, a safe place to go and meet their friends. And then environmentally, one very practical thing that kept coming up over and over again was more trees for shade when they're biking or walking or out, trying to move around. It gets really warm in the summer, so that bubbled up quite a bit. So next slide, please, Scott. And then around climate action, what we did is we provided each student with 3 tokens that they got to spend. And that spending was to indicate to council where they thought action should be taken on climate. For the elementary school, the top choice or where they spent their most money was providing more natural areas, natural parks, natural greenways, things like that. And then for the high school, and then I think this might relate back to what they thought needed to change in Port Alberni. The number 1 item that was most frequently mentioned was warming and cooling centers for the unhoused. Thanks, Scott. That's okay. We can go to the next one. So those were the results of the youth, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about the compiled results from the in-person and online community engagement. And the first topic that we'll talk about is the approach to growth for Port Alberni. We'll go to the next slide. So at the engagement events online and in person, we provided some baseline information. Where are we starting from and what does that look like in Port Alberni in terms of growth from now till 2042? We looked at the population growth, which is approximately 6,000 new residents are projected to arrive in Port Alberni between now and 2042. And that translates into the need for just under 3,000 new housing units in addition to the existing housing stock. So if we were to keep developing as Port Alberni and many communities around Canada have developed in the past number of decades, that means it's quite land intensive, and that means that we would likely need to see a boundary expansion for Port Alberni in order to achieve that type of housing throughout the community. So that was the business as usual scenario that we provided information on at the engagement events. And then we also provided an alternative growth scenario, which is in the next slide. And this scenario reflects the touchstone. So you may remember earlier on, we came to council and council supported the touchstones to guide the official community plan. And that was based on community engagement again. So what we did is we took the touchstone approach and we said, if the community wants us to achieve all of these things, what kind of approach to growth can we take to achieve that? Given that the population growth and the housing needs, and then how do we move between all of those different destinations and things? And a nodes and corridor approach was provided to the public to comment on and provide additional ideas or concerns about it. And what we heard, and I'll show this in the next slide, was that there was strong support for the alternative growth scenario. Really strong support for densification, developing, redeveloping in areas that might be underdeveloped or vacant. It would improve active transportation because nodes would be more dense and people could find it easier to walk or bike around. It would actually improve public transit because there'd be more population in certain nodes that would provide more efficient transit. Would also provide housing diversity and affordability. And most participants saw the connection between land use planning and climate action. So without sprawling out, you're reducing the costs of infrastructure, servicing, all those kinds of things. You're reducing the need to develop in natural areas and things like that. So there were two things that came up as areas of concern quite frequently. So there's a bit of a I guess, tension or push-pull between private developments, so especially related to the Birdie Street parcel, which is privately owned, in light of the desire by the community to preserve that as a natural area. And then the SOMAS land restoration, questions around the development and restoration of the waterfront there and the importance of that area in terms of climate adaptation to rising sea levels and those kind of topics as well. So next slide, please. In terms of climate action, we asked folks what their level of support was for the different types of climate action that communities can take in order to reduce emissions and in order to adapt to climate change. It was every big move sector had very strong support for climate action, so over 60% for each in climate adaptation and climate mitigation. So those that participated did identify that this was important to them and they supported strong action. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we did host two workshops. One was with the social sector that was typically underrepresented in past OCP work that had been done. So we had a targeted session with the social sector, and then we also met with a community representative team. And what we did in those workshops was we reviewed the initial public engagement outcomes. So we compiled all the results and we presented the key topics, just like I've reviewed with you. And then we wanted to understand, are there essential topics to be addressed in the OCP going forward? And next slide, we'll talk about what those are. What the workshop participants really made the link on was the land use and emissions are connected. So helping reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation or reducing the need to develop on greenfield areas, so areas that are currently natural and things like that, basically is a climate action in itself. So the decision to move forward on a node and corridor scenario is a positive move in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Next slide, please. Another thing that we talked about in the workshop with the two sectors was making sure that they're aware that the OCP needs to be compliant with provincial legislation. OCPs need to include a mitigation target in their OCPs, and I believe Director Smith will speak to that. But it is anticipated, based on engagement and the strong support for climate action, that there will be targets of 40% reduction and 60% reduction, which are just the standard that the province requires in an OCP included in the Port Alberni's OCP document. And it should be noted that every 5 years, it's now required that OCPs are updated by municipalities. So there'll be a chance to review that in short order as well. So in summary for the workshops, the key topics that were identified to address based on public engagement outcomes was, of course, housing was top of mind. Climate resilience. So how do we adapt to more extreme events in a better way? How are we better prepared for that? Reconciliation was a topic that came up very frequently in terms of how do we take action to improve relationships with neighboring nations and really integrate that into the OCP in different ways. And then there, again, the strong support for the alternative growth scenario. And that ends the summary of the What We Heard report, and I'll turn it over to Director Smith.
So I'm just going to continue on. So if you could go to the next slide. So just want to continue with the engagement that the city is also doing directly with both our local First Nations. The city has had an engagement session with the Sechot First Nation in early April. We were very pleased that we had about 65 participants in kind of two different sessions with the Sechot community. So we're very thankful that they invited us to their reserve and their territory, and they hosted us there. And so was very pleased that we received that early engagement with them. Staff have also met with elected chief and council with the Hepetcheseth First Nation and received to support to also work on a community meeting with their community members. And we are hoping to do that in early May. And I just certainly want to indicate that the information that we've received and will receive from First Nations in this early part will certainly be part of our OCP policy consideration, especially how it fits into a potential official community plan document. Next slide. So based on the engagement outcomes and what we heard, what we're presenting to council tonight, council is supportive, or staff is supportive of using the alternative growth scenario that receives support by the community and the provincial greenhouse gas, the GHG reduction targets, as a guide to how we move forward with part of our OCP development work. As indicated, that Kelly indicated, the province's GHG reduction targets are 40% reduction from the 2007 levels by 2030 and a 60% reduction from 2000 levels by 2040. So essentially the OCP would have policy that would support likely the development of a detailed climate action strategy to how outlined these targets would be potentially met. So it's not necessarily that the OCP would get into the really great detail of this, but certainly would have some strong policy statements about how the community needs to potentially move forward to meet those targets. Next slide, please. As council is aware, it's been quite some time since we did our OCP, 15 years now. I'm actually quite pleased that the province is going to require local governments to do them every 5. So, but that There is a requirement for engagement as part of an OCP, as it should be. You can see that in this early stage, we've made, I think, pretty good efforts to engage with the community, and that will continue through the process. But especially given the time that has occurred and the changes that are occurring in the community, that's why I think we went to some pretty strong efforts early in this process to engage. And again, as we indicated, the province does require through the Local Government Act for the official community plan to include targets for GHG emission things. So that is a requirement in the OCP. And we can see that the engagement did provide some support for us needing to move forward on those. Next slide, please. And so just kind of what's next. So if the committee recommends to council that their support for the general support for what you saw in the What We Heard report, in other words, working on the basis of that alternative growth scenario, and then we would get into much more detailed analysis around housing and options, and policy would start to build around that. Climate's resilience, again, policy would start to build around how we work towards compliance of the GHG reduction targets and reconciliation. Again, we'll receive strong input from both First Nations. That was a key item that we engaged with the Sashot on, and we'll engage with the Pechasith on. So that would also, again, help to frame what the policies would do in the OCP. And so again, as we move forward, we would certainly be continuing to engage with council and the community, but if supported, we would begin to start drafting the policy work based on some of what we heard for. And so we have a staff recommendation for you to consider. One thought after we did this thing, if council wished to be a bit more detailed, we could have a bit more language about that council supports the alternative growth scenario and greenhouse gas reduction targets as per the staff report dated on that as an alternative recommendation. We did this quickly, so if council or if committee thinks this is a bit too general, we could add a little more detail to that, and I'd work with the clerk, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Kelly. And I just want to thank both of you for continuing to engage with our youth and our community. And you're right, Kelly, they are fantastic. Two things did jump out at me. I was very pleased to see how much empathy the youth have for the marginalized residents for our community. That was extremely heartwarming. And secondly, that I'm sure the mayor is very happy to see that they want more trees planted in our community. So that's great. Questions and comments from council? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, and thank you, Scott and Kelly. Yeah, just two queries, really. The first one is just to really more for the benefit of making it clear to our community where we're going. And so I gather from what's been said as far as the alternatives for growth, we have sort of two basic alternatives: expand the city or go to densification, and we're moving towards the latter of densification. Is that correct summation?
So yeah, as we engaged with the community, we received more support on the engagement for that alternative growth scenario where greater densification would occur in some of our commercial, in some of our node areas, such as Uptown, 10th and Redford. Doesn't mean that infill and some level of greenfield development couldn't occur. You see the potential population that we're going to have to potentially consider, so it's not mutually exclusive. But if we are going to have higher density development, the support is that they be in those kind of already established areas so they can support transit, support multimodal pathways, support the commercial area, and that we would then be able to direct our infrastructure in that way as well. So that has been what the community has said to us is their stronger support than as opposed to what most communities across North America has been done, just continuing to sprawl and take trees down and just increase your infrastructure costs and all those other types of things. So that's what is being advocated by staff based on the engagement that we had with the community.
Yeah, and I found that very helpful, and I think that's something we can really help in the way of education again, is letting people understand the benefits of that approach, in terms of, better able to offer appropriate transit and all the other sort of savings that come with the densification model. The other query I had was more in terms of how to insert this into our OCP if it isn't, and that's in terms of industrial growth within our community. As we all know, this community was basically based on one main industry occupying a prime area in our community right on the waterfront. And my view continually grows that industry no longer needs to be on our waterfront. There's a lot more appropriate uses for industry. But it's a very difficult transition for us to go through, so we need to establish an industrial zone that is not in that prime area for where the urban dwellers can enjoy it and have light industry and commercial and retail businesses and housing. So I'm just wondering if we have a way of inserting into that model, or maybe you can tell us that it's already there, for establishing a large industrial zone so that in the next 50 to 100 years, as we're approached by industrial people that we want to incorporate into our economic base, where we can direct them to where they can grow and have no or very little conflict with the people that are living in the community, so that we can both grow together. So that's what I was wondering, if we have a place for that already in the OCP, or do we need to sort of bring that into the conversation a little bit more? Thanks.
So as staff has indicated, we haven't begun the development of policy yet because we wanted to do the engagement on the community. There is we've talked about two big picture things that will help guide the development or the OCP, but housing, there needs to be a separate industrial section that will have policy on that. That being said, I think if it's council's or the committee's or council's wish, for that level of detail, I think we would need to probably have some sort of policy that would indicate that a future study work would need to be done to make a determination, because I think we need to do an analysis of, well, what types of future industry do we need to be planning for? So I think, and then identify potential policy or land base that could go to. So again, if the committee and council wishes, that would be potentially a policy statement that would support future work that then, if approved, we could then bring to a future council meeting saying, here's the scope of work, here's a potential cost, here's the terms of reference about what that would potentially look like. I would also just like to take an opportunity to give a lot of thanks to other planning staff in our department. Both Brian McLaughlin and Haley have put in a tremendous amount of time to get to here. And we also took the advantage to engage some Vancouver Island University students to help us in some of our engagement work. So please, they've been really awesome to get us this far as well. So.
I think you have an awesome team, Scott. Yeah. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Scott, and definitely for staff for all the work that's been put together. It's more just comments on what I've seen. I do like the fact that 41% of the participants were ages 0 to 17. So a lot of our youth were participating. Also, I'd like to say too that how long have you lived in Port Alberni? Out of the participants, 42% were 21 years or over, and the next highest group was 35%, which is 5 years or less. So it's nice to get both the historical side of and people who've lived here for a long time, but also to have the new faces in our community come forward and have their say as well. And I'd also like to thank staff and just say that that's a great turnout for the Seychat First Nation, and approaching them and having them invite you to their traditional territory. So I hope the talks with the Hoopicheza First Nation will also be as fruitful. So, but thank you very much, Scott. Thank you for staff.
Councillor Dane.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this was great. Very much appreciated. I would like to make this motion, but before I do, Scott, could you just repeat the, you said what the alternative or the additional could have been?
It just provides a bit more detail, and that's essentially that the committee of the whole recommend that council support the alternative growth scenario and the GHG reduction targets as per the staff report dated April 15th, 2024.
Go ahead and make
Thank
the
you.
motion.
Yeah, I just need the report date, unless I can say so moved. What's the report date, if I can?
April 15th, 2024. So it's the report that's on the committee of the whole agenda.
Oh, okay, it's right there in front of me. That's today. I was listening and not thinking. Okay, yeah, so I will move that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council support the official community plan growth and climate action, what we heard report as presented, and further that Council support the alternative growth scenario and the GHG reduction target as per the report dated April 15th, 2024.
Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Solda. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Solda.
Sort of not on the motion, but it is. So I do support the model that Councillor Douglas was talking about, diversification, because the only way to go now is out Beaver Creek, and they'll have us hung by the time we're done. So I do like the idea of that type of model. I'm looking forward to the more engagement with the OCP plan, and I'm hoping, although 330 participants is amazing, I would love to see a lot more come out to the community, because as we're winding down and putting it all together, it'd be really nice to get more input from other people on the engagement. The interesting thing is the industry is that, because industry is so different from what I'm used to is the mill town, and that to me, that was industry, the logging and everything. And we still have it, but not as we used to. So I'm curious to know how that word industry is going to be when we have more discussion, when we need light industry land, and we know that brew pubs are light industry. Am I correct? Light industry? Just correct me if I'm incorrect.
Well, I think that's a BC assessment category, not necessarily what some people might consider industry. But that goes to the point, I think, if council wants us to do that, then I think there would be likely a policy in the OCP that would indicate that we would need to do more detailed work. Because I think, as council's indicated, industry has changed a lot and is going to change. So I think we'd need to likely engage some expertise in that realm to determine, well, what should future industry, what are their needs going to be? So that is beyond what the official community plan can do, but there could be a policy statement saying the city should consider doing this work in the future.
And I would agree with that. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Kelly, and thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions of the committee. For those participating electronically, please use the raise your hand feature and you will be called upon to speak in the order of which it appears. Is there any questions? Come on up, please, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just please state your name again for the
Oh,
record.
Michelle Fraser. In the beginning, this official community plan sounds wonderful. Increased densification, beautification, more trees, narrow streets. And we're looking at a population growth of 6,000. And then in the meantime, we've got to reduce our carbon emissions by 40% by 2030 and 60% by 2040. My understanding of where a lot of that's going to come from is that we have to get rid of a heck of a lot of cars, and we probably have to get rid of a lot of industry. I don't know, has anybody done that, looked at exactly how we can achieve those figures and what we have to do to get there? And also, if we increase electrification, like everybody wants to, do we have enough electrical grid to power everything? Electricity doesn't power heavy industry, from what I understand. And I think we still need fossil fuels, but I'm really concerned that population goes up, maybe we can plant a few trees, but do we take everybody's cars away? And then if we do that, do we increasingly surveil people and fine them and stop them from driving here, there, or everywhere because we can't meet these targets? And also, what happens if we don't meet these targets? So there you go.
I'll just make one quick comment, but CEO can, or Scott can respond after. Nobody's going to be taking people's cars away, but I think it's going to be a very natural process. For example, right now, economically, younger families cannot afford to have 2 cars in the garage anymore. So we're looking at increasing the transit route so people have more availability to maybe one person can take a car to work, where the other person in the family can maybe take a bus route to work. So I think it's just going to be a very natural process as we move along. Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
So the OCP wouldn't get necessarily into the details about what that would look like. We'd have to do a very detailed climate action plan. And of course, we can only do what was within the scope of an official community plan and the city of Port Alberni, right? There's higher levels of government that would have other jurisdictions. But so we could only do what was in the scope of the city. But a lot of what came out in the engagement was people seeing that if we plan the community different, that can assist in improving how greenhouse gas and the environment can be dealt with better in the community. But no, we haven't worked out any of these details yet. We're early in the process. Even the OCP wouldn't get into very detailed things. It would basically provide a number of policy direction supports in order to do future, more detailed work to see what could be done within the scope of the city.
Well, it'd be really nice to see the math on it if somebody could do that, but thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Come on up, please.
Of course, this leads right into what I had to say. We have been inundated with climate fear since the mid-'80s, and I do not believe it has been done for anything other than monetary purposes. There's over $1 trillion that's gone into climate mitigation to this day already. And we have wind turbines, solar panels, and other forms of energy production that do not serve a purpose in an industrial setting. We do not get dispatchable energy out of that.
Do you have a question coming?
I have worked as a millwright all my life, so I know a little bit about industry, and I know what industry is relocated offshore. That's why the industry is not here. But I also know that you're going to be inundated by directives from both the federal government and the provincial government to work with the community plan and reduce carbon. What I'm asking you to do is seriously consider doing some research and see if it is as necessary as they claim it is, because that's really what it boils down to. We're being told that it's
Sorry, sir,
dangerous.
but do you have a question?
Yes, I want you to see if you can find out, if you can do some research so you can actually be informed on the issue more so than just supporting the politicians that are telling us what to do. And that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully, you'll take the time to inform yourself.
Thank you. CEO, were you going to say something?
Sure. Again, I just think I'd like to reiterate what Scott said is we're at the early parts in the OCP. Much more information will have to be gathered before we actually set our targets and how we're going to achieve those targets. So I know there's many different ways that the province and federal governments are directing municipalities, and it will take years to unravel the whole thing. So again, as we move forward, we'll be taking input from everybody in the community, and I think Scott and his team did a good start here for setting high-level policy, and over the coming years, I'm hoping we can get the strategies that are required from the provincial government.
Thank you, CEO. Any other questions? Come on up, Joseph.
Good evening, Mayor, and Acting Mayor and Council, and those that are listening and those that are seating. Another long meeting. Just a couple questions looking at the official community plan and the engagement part, just kind of following through on this. And my question is going to be, how effective do you think this is, the engagement process? One of the things I'm just going to point out is the demographics, participants. 41%, 0 to 17. 18 to 30, 11%. That seems quite small. 31 to 50 is 22%. 51 to 70 is 18%. So just have a look at that. Those age 71 plus is 9%. So you can see the majority is 0 to 17 in that engagement. And you can see why. I mean, there was presentations at the school and different things. It's great to have the youth involved, and I think that should be in the case of a community, a very important part, of course, as are all the other age groups. Looking at the engagement with the community included over 330 participants. It doesn't say 330 different participants. Those could be multiple of the same person coming to another event, could be answering online and coming to a community event. So that's not a representation of how many different people. That could be half of those might be the same people over and over. So you might only have 150 there. It's just a guess, throwing something out there. The other one is, it says here, and I try and follow what's going on so I know when the events are popping up and are going to be, so I can get out there and be involved in them. And I've missed a few of them. I try and get them through the news. There's been some pop-ups that just show up unannounced. I've been to one of those. It says here 12 different communication tactics were implemented to advertise engagement opportunities from January 10th to the 23rd. In total, these tactics provided, this is in tonight's report, these tactics provide a possibility of over 76,000 opportunities to inform the public about upcoming engagement, communications included. And then it gives the different things, the newspaper, media, those sort of things. So there's 76,000 opportunities to inform the public is what it says. And there's 330 participants. And some of those could have been, as I said, it could be 150 that came out twice. And so I'm just curious, what do you think of the public engagement and the OCP and how that's working as far as engaging the public?
It can always be better.
Absolutely, yeah. So what are you going to do to make it better?
Scott, do you have a comment?
Public engagement is always challenging, especially when you don't have a particular topic or a one solid issue that for people to get coalesced around. I think you can see that the city tried to engage a number of different ways and tried to communicate that with the community also in a number of different ways. Again, because we're early in the process, you know, a number of people came out. I think it does show a diversity of people too. So, you know, you're right. I wish we would have more people come out on all aspects of land use planning and the OCP specifically, because of how important of a document it is to help guide our future. So we will continue to learn. We look for gaps. We've also, you know, there's been some online engagement that we're trying to do. We're trying to coordinate a few other things, and we'll continue to do that. I think we've been pretty successful thus far, considering we don't even have an OCP document or policies yet developed. This was early in the process, talking about some big picture things. So I feel it was quite successful at this stage, and we'll continue on as we build the development policy, come back out to the community again. And yes, please, pass the word if you hear it, and have as many people, the more people come out, the better. I've been satisfied with what we've done, the attempts that we've made thus far. Will we continue to look for additional opportunities? Absolutely.
Thank you, Scott. Leslie, come on up.
This is odd. Hello, everybody. Leslie Valerius, Port Alberni, and good to see you all tonight. Again, I'm following up on the official community plan. You're the last speaker, you're targeted. There was lots of discussion earlier tonight with Mosaic and also with Chief Owen on Fire Smart and Fire Safe. So in regards to the official community plan, I was wondering if it includes fire smart initiatives such as the building of structures, landscaping, and also how does it address the green belts?
So we haven't got into great detail there because we haven't started developing policy. But do I think there will be some policy certainly around the environment and our greenfield areas and potential interface wildfire? Yes. OCPs don't typically get into landscaping so much, except for maybe development permit area guidelines for our commercial and multifamily and those kinds of things. So in some ways, we could influence it in that. But again, as we build policy, that is certainly something we've kept in the back of our mind. We actually heard that from a few people, especially after last year's fire season. It was certainly an apt time for that discussion. So we did have that brought up. It certainly will be considered in our policy development as we move forward, and potentially a number of different ways.
Good, great. Yeah. That's the answer I was hoping for.
Awesome. Did you have another question? Or? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the public? Great, thank you. Oh, Councillor Mealy.
I'm not necessarily the public, but just to keep it a little light, just want to ask on behalf of Councillor Douglas and myself. Councillor Douglas is a billet parent. Game 7 is tomorrow night at the multiplex for the Bulldogs. So it's a little bit of a commercial. There are tickets available, but if you can't, please support us by listening online, Flow Hockey, or listen to Hammer on 93.3 The Peak. So thank you.
Go Dogs, go. If we're not there, we'll be there in spirit for sure. Great. So thank you, Scott, for helping out with question period tonight. Made my job so much easier. I appreciate that. Can we get a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, second by Councillor Dame. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you and good night, everyone.